Today's conversations could save your life. My guest, SHIRA Bowler, is the author of One Scan Saved My Life. Powerful account of how a routine scan she almost didn't take led to the early detection of lung cancer. She was 43, healthy, a mother of 4, and had never smoked. Yet, what doctors found would change everything. Her story challenges what we think we know about lung cancer and raises urgent questions about who gets screened, who doesn't, and why. She joins us now. So what led you, let me welcome you to the broadcast, but what led you to get that first scan, and why did you almost not do it?
You're right, Armstrong. Thank you for having me. Over the summer, was in New York, and I was pressured by my husband to do actually a full body MRI. I did not want to do it. I'm very claustrophobic. I wanted to see my friends in between meetings in New York, not lay in a machine. He ultimately won, and I did do the scan after canceling a few times. And that scan, interestingly enough, revealed a 3.8 centimeter mass in my right lung. But the radiologist at the time told me, don't worry about it. We don't look at lungs in an MRI often. Usually we use a low dose chest CT. And because I had never smoked a cigarette, because I'd run 6 miles that morning, because I was only 43 and ate out of the fridge, not the pantry, they told me if symptoms correlate with this mass, you should consider follow-up, and kind of dismissed it. And it was a few months later that I just think an angel came down on my shoulder and told me to do that follow-up CT that ultimately revealed that the mass had grown and I had lung cancer.
At what moment did this shift from routine follow-up to something far more serious?
You know, when I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a lung cancer radiology specialist, and I gave my imaging actually to her husband to share with her. And my father is a lung doctor. So as a pulmonologist, I also grabbed that imaging and shared it with him. And I think that it was at that point that the alarm bells went. I think that doctors and society today focuses on lung cancer being a smoker's disease. It's the older Marlboro man with the black coal lung. And that's just not what we're seeing now. They've done studies out of Northwestern last year that showed almost 30% of patients being diagnosed with lung cancer in their study were never smokers like me. They were not people that had secondhand smoke. They were low risk. They were young and healthy. And almost 70% of those studied in Northwestern actually did not meet the guidelines to get a low dose chest CT because they weren't 20-pack year history smokers and over the age of 50.
What do people get wrong about who is at risk for lung cancer, SHIRA?
So I think that the narrative in this country and around the world is that lung cancer is for elderly people that smoke a lot of cigarettes, and that's just not the case right now. Now, don't smoke, it's still not good. It still increases your risk for lung cancer, but a lot of people aren't big, heavy smokers. The United States Preventative Services Task Force has put together guidelines talking about smoking as a trigger and a reason for lung cancer. So in order to get a scan, just like we get a mammogram, you actually have to be over the age of 50 and smoke a pack a day for 20 years, which is antiquated because today people vape and do other forms of inhalation, as well as the fact that even if you smoke, it's not a deserved disease. You shouldn't be, tasked with lung cancer. The number 2 reason for lung cancer is radon levels in people's homes, and we're not testing or looking at that. We're not looking at family history like we do with breast cancer or colon cancer. So I think we need to change those guidelines within the HHS, USPSTF, and change it so that Medicare and Medicaid and health insurance companies cover people's screens even if they're not heavy smokers.
It's so important and critical that people understand. You were healthy, you had no pains, there was not something that were aching and agonizing you where you felt you needed to go to a physician. Talk about in depth, and what does that tell anyone else watching this, the importance of just regular checkups?
You're right, Armstrong, that is exactly the case. I had no symptoms, and the problem with lung cancer today is when a symptom finally presents itself, It is oftentimes an ache in your hip when you're on a run, in your bone, or blurred vision or dizziness because the lung cancer has actually spread to your bones and to your brain. And then it's too late. It's a death sentence. If you catch lung cancer in stage 4, it's less than 10% chance of survival. And we don't feel our lungs. Our lungs are amazing. They compensate. So, for example, I ran 6 miles the morning of my scan, and I had over an inch large mass, cancerous mass in my lung. It didn't pop up even when I did my pulmonary function test. And it wouldn't pop up because our lungs don't grow, but they expand and take in more air. And in the healthy parts, even when I had half my right lung removed, 5 weeks after my surgery, I was back to running 6 miles because my lungs were, the healthy parts were able to compensate and take in more air. And I think I'm extremely lucky that I caught it that early in a random scan. And just like we do mammograms starting at 40 or colonoscopies has moved from 50 to 45, if we were doing these low dose chest CTs on all patients, or at least those that have a family history, radon, burn pits for veterans, we would be able to catch the lung cancer in stage 1 and give you a 90%. We don't feel our lungs. We can't touch our chest and feel a spot like we can with the mammogram, with a breast cancer. And so we need to focus on changing that. I think people shouldn't be scared of getting a low dose chest CT. People shouldn't be scared of getting lung cancer because if we catch it early, it can be a fixable problem. Just like if we catch breast cancer early, we can cut it out, we can take medicine, and we can make it a fixable problem.
You, you
This
know,
country, they predict, is going to have 40% of people getting cancer in their lifetime. We need to work on healthcare, not sick care, catch it early, and live with it and die with it instead of from it.
I don't have to discuss with you what your cancer or the early scan meant to you and how different your outcome would be had you not had that, not gone with your instinct and your husband's insistence, because we see it play out with people every day. But as a mother of 4, how did you process this diagnosis personally and emotionally?
You're right. It's really hard to tell 4 little kids that their mom has cancer. Um, I at first thought I wouldn't even use the C word as I refer to it, but my kids brought it up right away. I've been extremely open. I think what ultimately happened, Armstrong, was when I realized how lucky I was that I caught it early, but that I wasn't unique in my diagnosis, that more people were dying from it than breast cancer, colon cancer, and uterine cancers combined, is when I decided I have to write a book. I have to spread the word. I have to educate doctors, educate policymakers, educate our insurance companies, educate my friends to take care of themselves, to advocate for themselves, because I have to be there for my kids. I have a daughter in elementary school. I can't even imagine missing, high school graduation, let alone elementary school graduation or her wedding. My older 2 are in high school, my middle daughter's in middle school, talking to them about it and being a strong woman and a strong mom in front of them. I feel lucky that I have my hair, that I look healthy on the outside and I feel strong on the inside. I talk to my kids all the time about eat out of the fridge, not the pantry, exercise every single day, make the right choices, do the right thing, because I think it helped me bounce back quickly. It helped me find it early, go through the treatment, and be here today with a book in my hand, yelling from the rooftops that people need to take care of themselves, that we need to focus on healthcare, not sick care, and be proactive and advocate for ourselves.
I think you make a very important point here in saying that lung cancer kills more Americans than many other cancers combined. Why isn't the awareness where it should be, SHIRA?
You know what? That is something I'm working on, Armstrong. And I think the answer to that is that historically, over the last couple of decades, we have focused on smoking cessation, which is important, but that is not the only reason we get lung cancer. So people think of it as a deserved disease. They think of it as a lifestyle choice. If you smoke and you get lung cancer, so be it. But the answer is it's not just a smoker's disease, and we're behind on the research. We're behind on changing that narrative and educating people about what it is. Sometimes I often think about, 2 decades ago when doctors would talk about if somebody presents in an emergency room with an elephant on their chest, numbness down their arm, that is the sign of a heart attack. Triage them, take them in immediately. What we have found over the last decade is that when women present with a heart attack, they're often lightheaded, a little bit out of it, nauseous, maybe over hot, want to lie down on a cold floor. And at first they kept saying, well, those are asymptomatic reasons. And what we've found over the last 10 years is no, those are the reasons 51% of the time. That is how a woman presents with a heart attack. So we've had to spend time re-educating doctors, re-educating peers, re-educating women to say, if you have these symptoms, that could be a heart attack. You need to take yourself to the emergency room. For women, it's not an elephant on the chest and numbness down the arm. So we're learning that. The way that my cancer looked, and the reason my radiologist missed it the first 2 times, was that it looks different than the Marlboro Man. I don't have a smoker's black coal lung. It is a different looking tumor, and we need to re-educate and we need to advocate. And I had to continue to push and say, well, what is this? Why is there a mass?
But what you're saying now is also critical because about a quarter of patients have never smoked like yourself. And it is so important to have these screening guidelines, which are still so narrow. But you got to have them. You got to push it. You got to be aggressive about it.
Yeah. Look, I think that my focus right now is a top-down focus and a bottoms-up focus. So I'm trying to work with Secretary Kennedy and Dr. Oz and Abe at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. I'm trying to educate them. I'm trying to work with the USPSTF to redo the guidelines. I'm also working with insurance companies, the CEOs, to educate them that it's not a lifestyle choice, to have them look back on claims data, to realize that the amount of lives and money that we will save by catching it early is worth it. And then from the bottom up, I wrote my book to educate my peers. I'm speaking to doctors. I actually started a foundation, Armstrong, called Cancer Doesn't Care. And the reason I started this fund is because I can pay for my own scan today. It's less than $200. And a lot of Americans can, but a lot more, they cannot. They cannot afford that scan. And until we can get guidelines changed, Medicare and Medicaid and insurance to pick it up, I want to be able to pay for that scan for people. And so all the profits from my book, all the work that I'm doing to raise awareness is also to raise money and to help people cover those scans so that we can catch the cancer early, so that it's not a death sentence, that we can re-educate and help people learn that it's not a lifestyle choice all the time, that it's not a deserved disease.
Sheila Bowler, one scan saved my life and can do the same for you. We'll be back with much more.
Thank you so much.
We're back with SHIRA Bowler. One scan saved my life. You know, what I found fascinating about your book, you did not just write about your experience or your life. You talked to so many other people who've had similar experiences. People never really considered having the scans because right now, many people can't even get screened, SHIRA, unless they meet these strict criteria, and which indicates that there's brokenness in the system that needs to change. But you address all these things in your book. Talk about that, please.
You're right, I do. Here's my book. It's called One Scan Saved My Life. And I try to address all of these things in my book. So not only do I talk about my story and my journey with lung cancer and what I learned, I talk about the science behind it all. I talk to other survivors, which is actually an interesting thing, Armstrong. Finding other survivors is a difficult thing to do. It's a lonely road out there for lung cancer survivors because so many of us die so quickly from it, because so many of us don't know that we have it. And a lot of people I spoke to don't want to share with people that they're lung cancer survivors. They feel like there's a stigma behind it. People will assume that they made a poor lifestyle choice. And then the other parts of the book, I talk about not just the science and my journey and peers' journeys that I've spoken to, but I also talk about some of the policy and the guideline changes that I'm very focused on. I think if we can get these guidelines changed and we can move the age younger and we can take off the smoking stigma history attached to it, then we can get Medicare and Medicaid and insurance companies to pay for it. And if we can get them to pay for it, we can combine it with your annual mammogram that women go through, or your annual or your every couple year colonoscopy that the entire country is doing now. And I think it's important to tie it in. You know, what's interesting about this low dose chest CT, Armstrong, is that it is a 1 minute easy scan. So for a mammogram, you have to take off an hour or two of work. It kind of hurts. It's not that fun of an experience. You're, shirtless in a cold room with a plastic machine around your chest. And for a colonoscopy, a lot of us know that's 2 days of missed work and everything that comes along with that. A low dose chest CT takes 1 minute and you don't even take your clothes off. You can go with your friends, you can go with your colleagues, you can go, on a coffee break. It's very simple and very easy to do.
You said something. Sometimes when we watch videos about planet Earth and the animals and how people disobey the guide and they walk right into a lion's mouth or get stomped by an elephant, we seem to make it seem as though we should have less sympathy for those people, that they deserve, that if somebody said there's no sign, there are sharks in the water, and so therefore, because you ignored the sign, you deserve to die. I mean, listen, no matter whether people smoke or not and whether they disobey laws, it should not be a death sentence for them. That should not be our mentality, that all of a sudden we care less about it because they did something they shouldn't have done, as if we're not all that human at some point in all our lives.
You're right. I mean, what's amazing about this is that's been like the stigma around lung cancer for all these years, and it isn't even a smoker's disease most of the time. So you shouldn't smoke, you're increased risk. I mean, Armstrong, I've done some research and worked with all these doctors and read a million papers. Did you know that breast cancer survivors have a 2-fold increased chance of getting lung cancer as a primary cancer within 5 years of diagnosis? This is not from radiation. This is not from medication. This is lightning striking twice. And that's terrible. And breast cancer survivors don't even know that this is a possibility. They don't know about this research. They don't know that they need to go to their doctor and say, I need a low dose chest CT. I know that I have a 2-fold increased chance of getting lung cancer as a primary cancer within 5 years of my breast cancer diagnosis. It isn't fair and it needs to change.
Do you think it's prioritized the same way as breast or colon cancer screening?
I think it should be, yes. And I don't understand why we don't do it today. And I think part of the reason is because historically we thought of it as a lifestyle choice and a deserved disease. I'm going to be honest with you. Nearly 100% of the time I tell someone I have lung cancer, even people I've known my whole life that know my dad is a lung doctor, that know I have never smoked. They say to me, oh, do you smoke? Oh, I didn't realize you smoked. Oh, I didn't know that you were surrounded by secondhand smoke. 100%. And Armstrong, my mother is a breast cancer survivor. She has survived it for 26 years. She's doing great. She's healthy. She has no markers. I have no markers. And I will tell you that 100% of the time, she tells people that she survived breast cancer, or when she was going through treatment 25 years ago, they ask if they can help her with her kids. They ask if they can make her dinner. They do not blame her for her breast cancer.
If you had the attention of policymakers today, which you have, and you're probably already doing this, what is the first change you demand and that you have advocacy for? And for viewers who feel healthy right now, just like you did, what should they do differently after hearing, not only listening to you, but going out to buy your book, to read your story, One Scan Saved My Life?
You're right. So what I would tell viewers right now is to buy the book, One Scan Saved My Life, and educate yourself. And then go to your doctor and tell them you want a low dose chest CT, because you want to make sure you don't have lung cancer. And I'm going to tell you right now that your doctor will likely give you pushback. Your insurance won't cover it, and you will have to fight them. So if you go to my website, cancerdoesn'tcare.com, there's information there to tell you how to advocate for yourself to your doctor, how to explain to your doctor that you want this scan. So it's there on the website and in my book, so that you can better educate yourself than the doctor and teach that doctor that they need to change their narrative and that they're being part of the problem. And then from the top down with policymakers, my hope and dream is that everyone gets a low dose chest CT when they turn 40. Just like every woman gets a mammogram and every person in this country should get a colonoscopy at 45. And my hope and dream is once that scan is completed and the radiologist reads it and we take into account family history, radon exposure, smoking exposure, burn pit exposure, occupational hazards, that we can take that information. There's amazing AI wrappers that can look at our CTs today and be able to say, things look good, they don't look good, come back in a year, come back in 6 years. Our lungs have nodules on them like our skin has freckles. So oftentimes, like a skin check, we need to see our lungs CT and get that baseline. Then maybe we follow up in a year and make sure none of those freckles and nodules changed. And then an AI wrapper can tell us, come back in 5 or 6 years, you're very low risk. We don't see any signs of cancer. That is my hope and dream, Armstrong. But at the very least, I would like to help some of the low-hanging fruit. If you have a family history of lung cancer, you need to get scanned. It is ridiculous that we're not doing that. If you have high radon exposure in your home, you need to get scanned. You need to get a mitigator for the radon. If you work in an occupational hazardous place like a hair salon or a nail salon or a lot of mines or, any factory, you should be screened. Those are low-hanging fruit. If you are a veteran or a current military professional and you were in those burn pits in Afghanistan or some of these areas that had terrible, terrible exposures, you need to be scanned. And so those low-hanging opportunities are out there and they are still not being covered, and we need to change that.
And finally, you early in your life had to think about the possibility that you would die. I mean, as well as trying to save your life and thinking about death and leaving your children, what is that like mentally? Thinking about dying. Of course, your mother survived breast cancer. That had to cross your mind. But when you faced it yourself, who were you then and who are you now?
I threw myself into this awareness. I threw myself into this book. I threw myself into running all over this country, yelling from the top of the roof to tell people that they need to be scanned, that I am the luckiest girl in the world to catch my lung cancer in stage 1. And that is what I've done. I take my kids to school every morning. I go to every sports game I can in the evening. And in between, I am yelling from the rooftops to get people scanned, to change the guidelines, to read my book, to understand that this is not a deserved disease, because cancer doesn't care.
And it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about your wealth, your status, your socioeconomic background. It treats everyone the same.
You're right.
Thank you so much for writing your book, SHIRA Bowler. One Scan Saved My Life, in bookstores now. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back with Sam FADDIS. And welcome back. King Charles and Queen Camilla visited America for the past week. White House State Dinner, a joint address before Congress, 9/11 in New York City. That was just more than pomp and circumstances, Sam FADDIS. I mean, with King Charles III visiting Washington, what strategic purposes does this special relationship serve, and what did he hope to accomplish, given the sort of combative relationship between Trump and his Prime Minister Sturmer at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think we need to keep in mind that the way the British system works, they have a head of state and a head of government, right? The Prime Minister handles the day-to-day grind, and the King or Queen is the person who's the figurehead and the long-term symbol of the country. And I think Charles was speaking in that sense, basically trying to make clear that, look, there may be all sorts of back and forth and we may not be agreeing on everything right now, but it doesn't change the fact that there will remain this long-term historic relationship between the two countries. I think that was his focus, not to get down in the weeds.
You know what's interesting, though? Here's what I find fascinating. With all the scandals and the controversy that the royal family has faced, I have not seen Congress more unified than I saw this past week when King Charles spoke. I mean, the Republicans and Democrats were on the same page. I mean, why does America, I know, still remain so closely, culturally fascinated with the British crown and the kind of respect they receive here in America? Even the president was talking about his mother had a crush on Prince Charles. I mean, I was listening. He's fascinated by it and all with it.
Yeah, I got to admit, Armstrong, it boggles me a little bit too. I mean, people, I don't have anything against the British royal family, but to be quite honest, I don't really care about the British royal family. They don't really matter to me. But oh my God, for a bunch of folks who, from a country that began its life with a revolution against these guys, it sure seems like we love it when they come to visit.
You know, I have to admit, I love it too. You know, I was in at St. James Palace last fall with Princess Anne. And I mean, I was like a little kid. I was thrilled. So listen, I have to confess, I'm one of those as well. You know, I want to move to James Comey and the rule of law. You know, James Comey now facing serious legal scrutiny. Does this represent accountability or a dangerous precedent of politicized injustice? And how do you take what he found on the beach, the number 86, 47 on the seashell? Put it in perspective for us, Sam.
So look, I mean, the way I look at it, this is, you know, everything these days is partisan, but this is really shouldn't be a partisan issue. You know, you can fight over who should be in the White House and, you know, leave it all on the field and have an election and go back and forth. Once we have somebody in office that's elected, you know, the institutions of government should be nonpartisan and supportive. And it is crystal clear to me, Comey's just one example. We got a whole bunch of guys and gals in law enforcement and intelligence agencies that decided a long time ago that they disapproved of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. And they didn't really care whether the American people had elected him, and they were going to do all kinds of things to interfere in the political process. And, you know, once we go down, I think accountability is absolutely critical. If we don't draw a line and say that that is unacceptable and you're going to prison if you do that, then honestly we're done, because each party is just going to, every time they're in power, do the same thing to the other party. And we watched the Roman Republic walk this road a couple of thousand years ago. We know how this movie ends. It ends with, there is no more democracy, there is no more republic. So I think there absolutely has to be accountability. And quite honestly, I think people need to be charged with things a heck of a lot more serious than they've been charged with.
So let me take you in a little more introspective on this then. From an intelligence standpoint, and you're an intelligence guy, what message does prosecuting a former FBI director, I mean, this is the second time he's been indicted, send to current and future officials inside the national security apparatus?
It tells them they're going to be held accountable and that there are rules. And look, let me make clear, when we first started hearing about the extent to which law enforcement and intelligence officers were interfering and actively becoming partisans against Trump, to be honest with you, I mean, it's been years now, but that boggled my mind, because despite what the movies say, when I was in the Central Intelligence Agency, you didn't come within 10 miles of American domestic politics. You understood that has nothing to do with your job. In fact, you are forbidden to walk that road. And it would have been unthinkable. In fact, if somebody even felt like they were tasked with a legitimate operation that might stray into that realm, you would find they would shut it down and walk away. It was like it was something you didn't want to touch and you stayed well clear of. So the idea that you have people that are actively and consciously doing this kind of thing is just mind-boggling, and it's completely contrary to the ethic that I worked with the whole time I was inside.
Do you actually think that the former FBI director threatened the president and tried to undermine his legitimacy?
Yeah, without question. He and a whole bunch of other really, really senior individuals knew exactly what the heck they were doing. I mean, their attitude is, this guy shouldn't be in the Oval Office. He's illegitimate. And quite frankly, they don't really care what those ignorant Americans out there think, because they know better than the great unwashed. And it's sort of their privilege and responsibility to decide who actually runs the government and what policy is supposed to be. Of course, that's all inside out. Their job is to implement policy decided by elected officials. And if you don't like that, then you quit, resign, and run for office yourself. You don't stage a coup from inside the government.
So you don't think this is more of a personal vengeance by the president? This is really credible.
Well, I'm not going to speak to what the president's personal motives would be. I mean, I would suspect by this time he's looking to get even with a whole bunch of people. So I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I think it's absolutely crucial that we have accountability for this. I mean, there are rules here that we have lived by since the inception of the Republic. And if we don't reinforce that those rules mean something, like I say, okay, well, then all bets are off. Why worry about trying to convince the American people who to vote for when you can just manipulate the whole process in the imperial city of Washington, D.C.?
So let's
and the
move
next
on.
thing you know, we won't have an election anymore.
Let's move on to the Federal Reserve, because what people don't understand, Sam FADDIS is prolific on all issues, not just Iran and Israel and Ukraine. So, Kevin Warsh, the Fed and economic power, has been tapped to reshape the Federal Reserve, and he's going to be confirmed within a week or so. The Senate is on recess next week, but certainly when they come back, he'll be confirmed. What does his worldview signal about the future, Sam, of monetary policy, and if Jerome Powell will remain on the board while Warsh ascends? And Warsh makes it clear that he's remaining on the board because of the investigation by the Justice Department, which the Justice Department had to drop in order for Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina to agree to release the confirmation so it could move forward for his confirmation.
Well, I think the change is going to mean that you're going to see the Federal Reserve begin to become more in line with the policies, with the desires, let's put it that way, of the president. That is my sense of where this is going. This is, highlights, of course, the fact that the Federal Reserve has enormous power and yet somehow manages to operate outside the purview of the President of the United States. I got to admit that I have some issue with that. I have some issue with the idea that you have an entity that is that powerful, has that much control over Americans' lives, and yet somehow doesn't really respond to the elected representatives of, the elected officials. I mean, to me, it leaves the American people less in control of really important decisions.
But are we entering, Sam, a period where central banking becomes more overtly political? And from a national security lens, talking to you, how dangerous is prolonged these kinds of things when we keep disrupting and changing these institutions? How long before it becomes a threat to our republic?
Yeah, I think it's already a threat to the republic. I mean, to take a couple of steps back in terms of perspective, we've been living off of the economy that we built before the Second World War for ever since, right? I mean, we won the Second World War, not to denigrate the service of the people that fought in it, but because we had an economy that was more powerful than anybody else on the planet. And we created, because of that, the whole reality, post-war reality. And I think we have long since hollowed that out and played games with that, and we're just kind of selling the family silver and trading on it. And the bill is coming due on that. We need some really long-term strategic planning on the economic side, just like we need on other sides, in terms of what exactly is going to sustain us and allow us to continue to afford all these commitments in the military and everything else if we don't get our act together.
We're going to continue with Sam to talk about oil prices, the Strait of Hormuz, and are we witnessing economic warfare? That and much more on the Armstrong-Williams Show. Iran, oil, and global shockwaves. Welcome back, Sam FADDIS. Oil prices are surging amid conflict with Iran. How close are we, Sam, to a true global energy crisis? And is the Strait of Hormuz now the most dangerous flashpoint in the world economy?
So we are already experiencing the economic shockwave from this, right? And it's going to get worse. And it's not just the immediate. I mean, oil prices are going up, and so gasoline prices are going up, and that's the connection most people make. But hydrocarbons, come out of oil and natural gas are used for a whole variety of things, really critical things like fertilizer for American farmers. So the ripple effects they're not ripple effects. I mean, they're major shockwaves through the world economy, and this is going to get a lot worse. The rhetoric from the administration continues to suggest that we believe that this is going to wrap up relatively quickly and it'll all come out in the wash, if you will. I am not at all convinced that we are anywhere close to a resolution of this thing. I think the Iranians are doing a whole bunch of things that show they're digging in for a much longer fight, so this may get a lot worse.
Are we witnessing economic warfare as much as military conflict, Sam? And define what you consider to be that could worsen in this escalating war.
100%. I mean, the Iranian response to our conventional military attack on them has been effectively to wage economic warfare and to hold the world economy hostage. So they don't really, they do shoot at our military, but that's not really the primary way they respond. From the beginning, they have responded by closing the Straits of Hormuz, by threatening oil and gas infrastructure, et cetera, and so forth. And they are going, it is unclear to me that they're not going to do much more of that. We have this ceasefire, but the Iranians are saying about every 5 minutes that any day now they're going to open up and really just tee off on all the Gulf states' oil and gas infrastructure. And they're, in the meantime, doing a whole bunch of things to ease the pain of our blockade of them. So the overland transport from Pakistan into Iran has exploded. Overland rail shipments to China from Iran has gone through the roof. There's now all kinds of reports that the Iranians are running smaller tankers all the way along the coast through territorial water from Iran all the way to basically Southeast Asia to make an end run around their blockade. So all of that stuff suggests to you that they're not getting ready to quit. These guys are looking for every way to allow themselves to hang on, and that this conflict is a long way from over.
If energy markets remain volatile, Sam, what does that mean for American households already facing inflation?
Yeah, it's not good. I was having a conversation with some family members earlier today, and we were talking about the impact on just in supermarkets already on the prices of everything. Every time I walk through a supermarket, the price of everything has gone up. And where I live in relatively rural Pennsylvania, you got a lot of folks on limited incomes, let's say. Every day I'm watching some mom with kids putting stuff back on the shelf, pawing through food, trying to really closely looking at those prices, trying to figure out what she can afford. And potentially this is going to get a lot more intense.
We have moved Ukraine and Russia off the headlines. The escalating war in Iran is off the headlines. Now, other things have taken precedent ever since the shooting at the Washington Hilton. It's the same place where Ronald Reagan was shot by Hinckley. Any observations? There's a deeper look into Secret Service almost a week later today in terms of their security details. People felt frightened and threatened, and people are still emotionally charged over it. What can we learn from this, Sam?
I got to admit to you, Armstrong, that I find the security posture of that event, the White House Correspondents' Dinner. By that, I mean the choice of venue, the amount of security that was deployed, everything as a package. To me, incomprehensible. Absolutely incomprehensible. We're at war with the world's greatest sponsor of terrorism that has a massive structure, right? The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, in league with Hezbollah and a whole host of other groups. What do these guys do for a living? They kill people in vast numbers in terrorist attacks all across the planet. Not amateurs, not wannabes. They didn't watch a video on YouTube. They are professionals that do this for a living. And they have killed our people by the hundreds and thousands. They have blown up embassies. They have blown up Marine barracks. They have blown up Jewish community centers. And you got a handful of guys with a metal detector standing basically outside a room in which you have the whole national security team of the United States inside. And one guy who's apparently just basically wacko comes within steps of getting into that room with a shotgun. My God, if the pros had showed up, the carnage would be unbelievable.
And they are watching the response, how easy it is to penetrate. They're watching it. It's really scary. It is.
Yes, sir.
No question about that. Has the war in Ukraine reached a strategic stalemate? Is one side quietly gaining ground? And what is the real end game, Sam, here? Territory resolution, regime change, or prolonged proxy conflict?
Look, I think we're in the same place we've been now for months, although actually, if anything, the Ukrainians, I think, are gaining some ground. I don't mean physically, but they're doing some serious damage to the Russians. I mean, the Russians are going to have to acknowledge that they failed and Ukraine is not a proxy state and they're not taking Kiev. And the Ukrainians are going to have to accept they're never getting back all the territory they think they should get back. And until then, I guess they're just going to keep killing each other in significant numbers, but that's where we are. And, the Ukrainians have a hold of the jugular for the Russians. Which is oil, right? I mean, Putin can't fight a war if he can't sell oil. When you see refineries burning, and he can't, they've got a hold of that the Ukrainians do. I mean, Putin ultimately is going to have to face the fact that he can't win this fight. Now, how long it is before that guy decides to face the music, I don't know, but that's where it's going to end.
Are U.S. interests aligned with European priorities, Sam, or diverging beneath the surface?
Yeah, kind of both, right? I mean, do we align? This is the issue I have with people that talk about allies. Ally doesn't mean like he's your best buddy, your blood brother, and he's with you through thick and thin in every in every fight. That's not what ally means. Ally means we have an alliance with another country, and in some specific identified ways, our interests align. And NATO was always, what's the interest? Keeping the Russians out of Paris, keeping them from overrunning Western Europe. That's what it was built on, defending Western Europe from the Warsaw Pact and Russia. Now, of course, that threat has receded to a great extent, but now we want to treat NATO as if they're going to align with us and show up anywhere on the planet with us in any context. Well, that's never going to work that way. I mean, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't expect more from the Western Europeans. I'm just saying that's not a realistic expectation, right? You can't just go to war wherever you want and then announce to the Germans, the Danes, and the French that you demand that they show up. Obviously, in a lot of situations, they're just going to say, not our fight.
What have we not talked about here today, Sam, that's is equally important?
The role of China, as usual, right? I mean, the Pakistanis are shipping stuff. They designated 6 new land corridors to ship stuff into Iran, okay? That's not baby formula. That's going to be solid fuel. That's going to be the precursors for solid fuel for Iranian missiles in large quantity. Okay, but Pakistan is just a transshipment point. That's not coming from Pakistan. That's China. That's China in league with Pakistan, sending everything overland into Iran to keep them in the fight. That's the Chinese, in effect, arming the Iranians to kill American servicemen while they're figuring out ways to continue to buy the oil. So as usual, we end up where, we're already at war with the Chinese, basically, right? They're already waging war on us just on a lot of, I guess on any given day, we pretend like it's not happening.
Does the depletion of our missiles and our war supplies and the fact that our assets are spread all over, does that concern you, just in case something rises, flares up over in Asia?
Yeah, Armstrong, you have said to me on many occasions, or asked me, are we spread too thin? The answer, as usual, is way too thin. We're getting ready to deploy a Marine Expeditionary Unit to South America and the Caribbean, right? This is a typical thing we do with 2 or 3 ships, 2,500 Marines. We don't actually have any available amphibious warfare ships for this deployment. So they're now cobbling this together using other vessels that aren't even actually United States Navy vessels on which to embark our Marines to handle a routine deployment to South America. We're out of gas. You're stretched too thin. There are literally no available ships for that commitment right now. That ought to give everybody real pause. Like, okay, guys, we need to really take a hard look at the commitments we're making and how overextended we are.
What's your assessment of the termination of the Navy Secretary by Hegseth?
I think it's structural and long-term shipbuilding type stuff. I mean, the Navy is just way behind. They've had to cancel all kinds of shipbuilding programs. I mean, they look at this and they know when they're going to retire each vessel, right? They don't just guess. They can look on the charts and see, okay, X number of ships are being decommissioned, and we have far fewer than that coming out of shipyards and no way to dramatically accelerate this. So you realize that we got real big strategic problems with our force structure, shipbuilding, and all kinds of stuff. And I don't think the Navy Secretary was getting it done in terms of fixing that. So he had to go. And to that extent, I support that. I mean, we've been talking about these problems for a long time and not fixing them.
Your final thoughts?
I will hope to God that we find a way to wind down this war in Iran sooner rather than later, because the longer it goes on, the worse it is. I mean, from munition depletion standpoint, inflation at home, political prospects for the midterms, for the GOP, the bill is going to come due at some point for this.
I want to thank Sam FADDIS and SHIRA BOEHNER for joining us today. I encourage you to go out and buy her book, One Scan Saved My Life. Like you, and many of you, I'm going to enjoy the Kentucky Derby today. Is the first leg of the Triple Crown here in Louisville, Kentucky. But for that, let me say goodbye to all of you and thank WJLA 24/7, especially the National News Desk for always a job well done. We're out of here.